Welcome to an Odyssey in Mixology. In this video, I'm making two s'mores cocktails with the same flavor profile, but with a huge gap between their quality, costs, and the effort it takes to make each. Enjoy! Now, I don't own a lot of flavored spirits because there's just more diversity in liqueurs. With liqueurs, I can mix and match spirits to flavors and ensure that both components are of good quality. Off-the-shelf flavored spirits are also pretty hit or miss across the board. Of all the flavored-based spirits out there, flavored whiskey probably has the worst reputation, and as a result, I rarely peruse that aisle at my local Total Wine, but last week I did, and I came across this bottle from Ugly Dog. So this is a s'mores flavored bourbon, and I picked it up for a few reasons. First off, campfire s'mores happen to be my favorite dessert of all time. And secondly, this was only $13 on sale. Now, at that price point, my expectations couldn't be lower, and its reviews on Total Wine's app were overwhelmingly positive. Now, I'm happy to say that after having tried it, I am pleasantly surprised. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't going to convert all you single-barrel cask-strength bourbon lovers out there, but it's worth more than the $13 I paid for it. The taste is accurate and not as artificial or really as sweet as I've come to expect from a bottle in the dessert whiskey category. Despite exceeding my expectations, this mainly belongs near a campfire getting passed around by a group of friends who each thought the other was bringing the ingredients for s'mores. I just wouldn't put this on the back of my bar because it's not what I prefer to drink either in a cocktail or by itself in this setting. Now let's say I did want to use this in a drink. The easiest thing I could make would be a s'mores old fashioned, and Ugly Dog's website has a few different ones, but the one I liked the best was outlined on the release pamphlet for this bottle. It's made up of their s'mores whiskey, a standard bourbon, a couple dashes of Angostura bitters, and a bit of water. Now, minus the water, it's the exact recipe I would come up with for a low-effort s'mores cocktail, and that kind of got me thinking. What would go into the high-effort version of this drink, and ultimately is it worth spending the extra effort and cost on it? Let's find out. I'm going to start with the low-effort Ugly Dog S'mores Old Fashioned. Now, they recommend using their non-flavored bourbon, but they kind of have to use their own whiskey if it's a recipe on their website. Instead, I'm going to use Bullet, because it's a better rated whiskey and it's still a budget bottle. This will give the low-effort cocktail a better chance against the high-effort version while still keeping the costs fairly low. For this cocktail, the s'mores whiskey is bringing all of the chocolate, marshmallow, and graham cracker flavor. The bitters add some complexity and spice, whilst the Bullet is just a solid but not particularly interesting backdrop for the main flavors. It's a very straightforward recipe to follow. Now, due to the magic of editing, I'm going to put the low-effort cocktail aside so that I can try it side by side with the high-effort one later in the video. Now, one flavor that's missing in the Ugly Dog whiskey is the campfire wood smoke. So adding this, as well as having a heavier emphasis on the graham cracker, is going to be really important to bring in a full and balanced flavor. A better base whiskey and keeping the overall sugar content low, all whilst preserving the natural flavors, will increase the drink's quality and drinkability overall. This definitely isn't going to be a dessert drink by any stretch. Now for the main whiskey, I want to avoid any that have a dried fruit profile. Instead, I want to focus on those with predominantly spiced or woody notes. Redwood Empire is my favorite whiskey distiller, and their Bottled and Bond Rocket Top is an incredible rye. I have a few other options, but what I'm actually going to go for is a Woodford Reserve Double Oaked Bourbon, just so I can lean into that wood flavor one step further. This is a moderately expensive whiskey, but it has an interesting double barrel aging process. Both of the barrels are oak, but they have different toasted wood and char levels. This adds in the extra wood notes that will allow this whiskey to work really well with this high-effort campfire s'mores cocktail. Now, the graham cracker aspect of this drink seems a bit difficult to recreate, but I'm actually just going to infuse this directly into the double oak. Now, this isn't a drink I'm going to make regularly, so I'm only going to infuse about 10 ounces of this. Now, one graham cracker slice is actually 4 individual graham crackers, just separated by the perforations. As far as infusions go, this is a very simple ratio because I'm going to use 1 rectangle per 1 ounce of whiskey. The next thing to do is to crush these up either in a plastic bag or a mortar and pestle, but you want to be able to pour this into the whiskey without spilling it everywhere or clogging a funnel if you're using it. Now, this doesn't look appetizing now, and it's definitely going to look worse in 48 hours when it's done infusing. But once it is, all of the particulates can be strained out with either a cheesecloth or just a really fine filter. After being strained and filtered, the color is a light orange, cloudier version of the original. Now, you can further remove the solids from this by leaving it in the fridge for a day and then straining again, but it's never going to be perfectly clear without a lot of clarification and extra filtration. At that point, there's really not a benefit to using the really nice whiskey because you're going to strip out some of what makes this unique. I also made a few drinks with this before filming, so that's why there's less in the bottle now. Anyways, there's now a wonderful graham cracker aroma mixed in with the heavy wood. It is a bit too strong, but that's actually intentional because I like to use this in conjunction with a different bourbon, or at the very least some of the uninfused double oaked. Now, making a strong infusion allows me to adjust the ratios in the final drink, but if you wanted to use only this in your cocktail, I'd probably reduce the graham crackers by at least half. Because my preference is to use a strong infusion, I'm going to use 1 1/4 ounces of an uninfused bourbon, along with 1 ounce of the graham cracker one. I'm actually going to use Eagle Rare for this because near MSRP, it's a good bottle, and it has the vanilla and wood notes that work really nicely here. The next flavor I need to recreate is marshmallow. And again, this seems a bit complicated, but marshmallows are mostly sugar, and that means they'll melt down and can be mixed with a simple syrup. Simple syrups generally fall into a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 ratio of sugar to water. Since the simple syrup will also include the sugar from the marshmallows, I'm going to bring 1 cup of water to a boil and then turn down the heat before adding half a cup of brown sugar, all whilst continuously stirring. For an old-fashioned, I like to use a brown sugar because the flavor complements the whiskey just a little bit better. As this mixture begins to blend, it's a good time to toast the marshmallows. I'm actually looking for a bit of char on them because of the other smoke and heavy wood flavors that I'm creating in this drink. A bright, uncooked marshmallow flavor wouldn't work as well here. I'm using 6 marshmallows for my simple syrup. Once they're cooked down and the mixture is homogeneous, it can be poured into a straight bottle and left to fully cool down. Now, the final major flavor to a s'more and this cocktail, of course, is chocolate. Now, that could come from a chocolate liqueur, but I'm sticking with the traditional old-fashioned recipe, and that means no liqueurs to dilute or detract from the base whiskey. Instead, I'm going to use bitters. My current favorite chocolate bitter is El Guapo's Spiced Cocoa Bitters. Their flavor is natural, but a bit weaker than other chocolate bitters like those from Woodford Reserve and Angostura. Both of these are good, but I ever so slightly prefer the El Guapo bitters despite the weakness. And as far as the weakness goes, if I was using 3 dashes of the Woodford Reserve chocolate bitters, I'd have to use about 6 dashes of this to balance everything out. Neither of these will add sugar to the drink, but they will create the chocolate notes that will borrow some of the simple syrup sweetness just to round everything out. Now, with these ingredients, I've got the high-effort s'mores old-fashioned pretty much outlined, but I haven't covered the smoky part yet. For that, I'm going to add a bar spoon of a peated Islay Scotch to the top. I would love to add more because this is my favorite type of whiskey by far, but I find that hints of smoke work better than any sort of high volume in this cocktail. Still, I'm going to use my bottle of Port Charlotte heavy peated Islay barley because of the smoothness in the flavor and the high peat smoke. Whilst the low-effort s'mores old-fashioned gets an orange peel garnish, the high-effort version gets a much fancier one. This is a coral Thule, and it serves very little purpose beyond just being a really cool aesthetic for the drink. It's made by combining water and flour, but in this case I'm also adding cinnamon for the smell and some activated charcoal for the color. These ingredients get turned into a batter that then goes into an oiled pan at high heat until all of the liquids have evaporated. When it stops bubbling and the edges have lifted up off the pan, then it's time to gently remove it with a spatula and tweezers. It's a bit tricky to master because of how brittle these things are, but there are some detailed guides online if you're not having much success. It's edible, and the cinnamon does add some flavor, but this is a garnish more than anything else. So let's put everything together and create the high effort and much more expensive s'mores Old Fashioned. So let's compare these two. On this side, I have the low-effort s'mores Old Fashioned cocktail that cost me about $2.24 to make. The high-effort version one over here comes in at $7.31. Now, that being said, where I live, if I was to buy the low-effort drink at a bar, I'd probably expect to spend $10 to $12. The high-effort one, probably closer to $40. It sucks, which is why I tend to make my own. So the aroma from the low-effort cocktail actually smells more like s'mores than the high-effort one, but it's also sharper and a little less interesting. The high-effort cocktail smells less focused. Everything kind of blends together into a primarily wood, graham cracker, and bourbon medley. So the low-effort cocktail has a bit of a synthetic taste in the beginning. It's not overly unpleasant, but it is an immediate reminder that there's some artificialness to this. Surprisingly, and to this drink's benefit, the aftertaste doesn't share that though. And the flavor from the bourbon and bitters lasts quite a bit longer, so over the course of a single sip, you've got this really interesting progression in the flavors. Now, initially, you're hit with the explosion of s'mores flavor with, again, the artificialness kind of there in the background. But what follows that is a nice balanced bourbon and s'mores flavor that tastes a lot more natural, and that all ends with the bourbon smoothness. It's actually pretty decent, and after a few sips, that initial flavor explosion isn't nearly as detrimental to the drink as I first thought it would be. Overall, this is actually pretty nice for what it is. It's a cheap s'mores Old Fashioned. So, the high-effort drink's main selling point is the fullness of the complex flavors, and unfortunately, in my opinion, that's also what kind of holds this back a bit. Now, there's a lot of nice flavors here, but overall, it's a bit too rich, even if it isn't overly flavorful. Now, that being said, I like the individual components of this drink more, despite the richness, and they all do come together really well. The category of dessert cocktails does not have a good track record, and there are some really good ones out there, but generally when we're using flavored bourbons and flavored whiskeys, there's always something missing, and usually that thing that's missing is freshness. And this one has it, and this one doesn't. But this one also doesn't need to be pretentious. It's not trying to be more complex. You're getting the marshmallow, you're getting the chocolate, and you're getting a good whiskey and some bitter spice that you can pair everything with. If I'm craving a s'more, then arguably neither of these fill that void, but one I can throw together without denting my wallet in any regard. The other one is a lot more effort, and it's expensive. And I could probably drink about the same amount of this one as I can of this one, and whilst I might enjoy this one a little bit more, it's not head and shoulders better than this one. This one is perfectly good in its own right in bringing that marshmallow and chocolate flavor forward. So if the deciding factor is which one of these is a better cocktail, then it's the high effort one. This is more unique, it's more technical, it's more interesting, the flavors are more full, it packs more of a punch. This one's more toned down, it takes almost no effort to make, and it's significantly cheaper. So if the question is, which one is worth it more, then I think this one is, because I can get through the same amounts of these, and I would enjoy them both for different reasons, but one of these I would spend a lot less on and a lot less effort. A decent metaphor for this is when you're in the mood for a burger. Sometimes you want a fancy burger, and sometimes you just want to hit up the nearest fast food joint. It's the exact same thing here. I like both of these for different reasons, but the cheap one is the one that I would probably make if someone requested a s'mores old fashioned. This one is just too much, even if it's a better and more technical cocktail. The s'mores old fashioned is summed up perfectly by the writing on Ugly Dog's bottle. This is best shared outdoors with friends. This isn't a great cocktail, but few things would be more enjoyable out of a solo cup sitting around a campfire. The quality of this cocktail is surprisingly high when considering the low effort and cost to make it, but it is still mediocre at heart. The May I Have Some More is a high-end cocktail that takes a campfire s'more and recreates each part well. Custom ingredients are a bit hard to use in other drinks, so they'll most likely be reserved for this one. Whilst a quality cocktail, the rich flavors, high effort, and high cost make this a bit hard to justify. If I was given this drink, I would be ecstatic. As it is, it was a cool experiment, but not something I'll be repeating anytime soon. That's it for my video on comparing a low versus a high-effort s'mores old fashioned. The next 4 videos will be my segment using ginger in cocktails, as well as a review of ginger liqueurs on the market today. If you enjoyed this, then please like and subscribe. And thank you for watching. Cheers!